Welcome back to my cozy corner of the internet. I'm Mayastar, and this is the Mayastar Podcast. I teach energy healing courses online through Mayastar Academy, share spiritual guidance and mystical musings on the Maya Muses blog, and provide healing, ritual, and spellcasting services. As a star-seeded shaman and professional witch, on the Mayastar Podcast, I release articles, discussions, and energy updates every week, covering energy healing, spiritual awakening, lightworkers, starseeds, magic, and New Age spirituality. This episode is being re-released with upgraded audio and new cover art to coincide with the launch of the new Mayastar Podcast YouTube channel. Please check it out and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of the new content coming soon. And welcome back to my cozy corner of the internet. I'm Mayastar, and you're joining me now for another unscripted video. And today I've got notes for what we're going to talk about, so I'll just go over those so you have some idea of what we're going to cover today. First thing we're going to cover is the Ocean of Intuition Third Eye Activation course, which is currently on a special offer. And because it's related to intuition, I also would like to cover some questions regarding developing your skill in interpreting your intuitive promptings, and also look at some habits and techniques you can use to develop your intuition. And we'll also be looking at the chakra of the third eye and why we activate that, and what the benefits of doing that are for somebody who is practicing energy healing. So the first thing we can say about the Ocean of Intuition Third Eye Activation is that it is helpful whatever your spiritual practice. You don't need to be practicing energy healing to work with this particular modality. It's designed to increase your sensitivity to the ethereal and help you to gain clarity so that you're able to decipher what you're actually experiencing. Now, one thing that I would point out straight away is that although we call it the third eye, it doesn't only see, it is your center of psychic perception. And in the Avalonian tradition, the Avalonian trilogy of courses includes the Avalonian Alignment Program, Star of Avalon Ascension, and Avalonian Spectral Activations. And in that system, the third eye chakra is also called the Star of Perception. And I think that communicates pretty well why it's a bit misleading to think of it as your third eye. It's your center of perception, the filter through which you interpret the energetic reality. Now, you may not think of it as being a reality at this point, but if you work regularly with energy healing techniques, you soon realize that the energetic signature for everything you see is accessible in certain circumstances, in a certain level of consciousness. You're able to connect with it, and when you connect with it, you may not see it. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll see it, but you may feel it. Some people even hear it. I'm one of the people that sometimes hears energy, and some people just experience a sort of vibration. They're aware of a kind of resonance within their energy field, which is much harder to explain. It's more like a feeling or a vibe, but certainly not something that you can see. So that's the first thing to point out. That opening the third eye isn't only about being able to see people's auras or anything like that. It's also about being able to interpret symbols that come to you. Now, symbols will appear in dreams and visions sometimes, but they can also come to us in the real world. For example, when you see angel numbers, you look at the clock and it's 11:11, and you think, well, it's got to mean something. It doesn't necessarily always mean something, but if you're open to the fact that it could mean something, then your intuition is there to guide you to any possible meaning behind it. So the way I would like to explain that is the reality behind things is an energetic construct. The reality that we live in is a physical construct, but everything that we see physically represented is almost symbolic of the energetic reality. It's like a condensed version. It's like an anchor for that energy. And so developing your intuition can also help you to differentiate between the subtle, very subtle differences between those energetic signatures. Now, that's not something that happens overnight. It does take practice. It does mean you'd need to regularly work with energy healing techniques to develop your energetic vocabulary. You become aware of different vibrations by being attuned to them, and once you've been attuned to them, you experience more of that resonance, so you're able to differentiate one frequency from another. And that can be important when you're practicing as a healer. For example, if you were using the Ethereal Crystals healing system, where you're working with different crystal energies, and when you're working with a system like that, it's helpful if you can differentiate between one crystal's energy and another crystal's energy, because when you can, that helps you to intuitively feel your way to the crystals that you need to work with in any particular session. So developing your intuition can support that kind of precision in your healing practice. I mean, that when you're working with a system like Ethereal Crystals, at first you will begin working with it using the correspondences that are described in the course, so that you will know that this crystal can be used for this, that crystal can be used for that. But as time goes on, you will become more experienced in the specific energies of each crystal, and that will help you to be drawn to the right crystal for that situation at that time. And it's not always going to correspond with the suggestions in the manual. And I would always say your intuition is the superior guide. If you feel that, like, perhaps you might have a situation where you were feeling particularly emotional, a little bit frazzled around the edges, and reading the manual, you thought, rose quartz, that's got to be the one. Rose quartz is the one that I'll work with to try to soothe the rough edges of my energy field right now. But then later on, having that experience with your intuition more finely tuned, you might think, oh no, I'm being guided towards a more grounding energy like black tourmaline or something. Perhaps the actual problem isn't so much that I'm stressed, it's that I'm taking on external energy and I need to fortify my energy field. So, you know, it's those sorts of things where it's only experience that will teach it to you. You can start off when you learn a new energy healing system, just following the instructions in the manual and learning the correspondences if that's appropriate for that course. But later on, as your intuition develops, you'll be able to fine-tune your practice. You'll be able to tune in to another person's energy, and your intuition will guide you to whatever's upset within the system, sort of thing. But this is a skill that you learn as you go along. It's not something you just suddenly have the ability to do. You've got to be patient with yourself, and you've got to be consistent in your practice, and these things will come. So that's the main reason why we activate the third eye. It's going to also, it helps with other things such as dream interpretation and being able to understand symbols and impressions that come to you. And that's another suggestion I have. If you want to develop your intuition, a very powerful way of doing that is to start writing things down, especially write about your spiritual sessions, whatever it is, whether it's meditation or energy healing, or simply contemplating energy work while you go for a walk or something like that. But if you keep a record of your experiences and your impressions, you're sending a message to your unconscious mind that you're actually paying attention to what's coming through. And that allows you to ground the perceptions. The important part is that you need to be able to ground in order to interpret the impressions you're receiving, because those impressions can be very vague and very ephemeral and ethereal and just extremely subtle. So you need to be able to sort of condense it in a way in order to interpret it. And that's something that's what the third eye allows you to do. It allows you to increase your perception by sort of creating the filter that allows the energy to be experienced in a condensed way. That means you can put a name to it. That means you can that you get some sort of feedback, so you know it's there. Perceiving it is half the battle, because it at first, one of the main problems people run into when they're trying to connect with subtle energy is that they're trying too hard, and that they have expectations of what their experience of that energy is going to be. They think it's going to... They're looking for tingles, or they're looking for heat or feelings of coolness or something like that. And if you have a specific idea going into it as to what you think you should experience, you're actually limiting your perception, and that's quite a fast way to squint your third eye. So you may pick things up, but you may not. And when you do, the lens that you're filtering it through is going to be a little bit more compromising, because you're already applying judgments, definitions, and measurements to your experience of that energy, when what you're actually looking to do is experience something beyond what you've been able to perceive in the past. So it's not really helpful to bring your previous experiences or lack of previous experiences to the table. Another point that I've got on my list: the biggest impediment to your intuition is your ego. Your ego wants to label things, and it wants to quantify and analyze. And when you bring that energy to your spiritual practice, sometimes it can restrict your intuition. Something that I would point out here is you have access to different states of consciousness, and some are conducive to certain work and others are more conducive to other work. And like, that's one of the things that I've always found when I'm doing spells for people. I can't do divination at the same time, and it's like those two things, my consciousness is just so different. On the one hand, when you're working a spell or you're directing energy magically, you're very focused and the energy is being expressed outwards. Whereas when you're using a divination technique, you're more receptive and you're drawing it towards yourself. So those two things are different techniques, but they require different levels of consciousness. And well, for me, they require different levels of consciousness, access to different states, and that where my perception is different from one thing to another. So I can't do them both at the same time. Well, you know, that's just one of those things where you learn as you go along that it's best to handle those two sessions separately. But that's something you'll have to learn for yourself as well. I mean, it may be different for you, so experiment, keep a note of your experiment so that you're sending that message to your unconscious mind that you're receptive to the messages, you're receptive to the communications. Please send more, and that will help. Let me see, what else have we got here? Oh yeah, here's an idea that I've had that I thought people may like this idea, but I'm not sure, because it's a little bit woo-woo for some people, I'm sure. But I put here, why working with the ocean of intuition, third eye activation at the full moon is a good idea. And the reason is, one of the techniques discussed and explored in the course manual is called scrying, and this is what people do with crystal balls, you know, where you're gazing at it and you're using that to activate your third eye. You're using that to achieve the state of consciousness where you're receptive and you're able to draw the energy towards you and perceive it. So this technique of scrying doesn't require a crystal ball. If you prefer a crystal ball, then that can be expensive. They're usually pretty small, although no, you get some that are pretty much just glass, so those ones are cheap, I'm sure. But it depends whether that's something you feel would help you. But you don't need to. The simplest way to learn scrying is to get a bowl, put water in it, and put a coin in the bottom. and then gaze into that in very low light. And I recommend using a dark coloured bowl, because that can help you to almost feel like you're gazing into a deep pool of water. It's funny how as your consciousness releases, you start to experience the water within the bowl. And if you feel energy vibrations, if you become more aware of them, you get used to the experience of connecting with the elements as well. And when you connect with the element of water, that is the element that's associated with your intuition. So it can be good in that way, just having the physical representation of water that you can think is a symbolic representation of the ocean of the unconscious, the ocean, the great ocean of the collective unconscious, which is basically the energetic reality that underpins our physical reality, where we find all the magic and meaning. And if you're looking for it, you ultimately will find it. But don't be looking for it with judgments. Don't be looking for it having already decided what you're going to find, because that will limit what you do find, and it may block you from realizing what's really there. And developing that mindset takes time, but a practice like scrying can really help, because it requires you to focus on being receptive to those energetic signatures, to the emanations from those signatures that interfere with your energy field to a very subtle extent, but which you can learn to perceive over time. And I recommend working with this technique at the full moon, because the full moon also represents the clearing. It brings light into the darkness, so it clears away the shadows and helps you to find some clarity. So symbolically, that's a good time for you to work on developing your intuition. And even if you think, well, it sounds like a bit of a palaver, it's not really what I do with my spiritual bowls of water, full moons, it's getting complicated. You don't have to do any of that. It's just that if you're the sort of person who likes the routine and likes to practice their energy healing on a regular basis, and you want to switch it up and you want to work with different techniques and different energies, then it's good to have a routine that aligns with, it could be dates, it doesn't have to be the actual full moon, but because the full moon is a symbol for bringing light into the darkness, it can be a good time to do it. And also, during a full moon, those subtle energies are amplified, and that can make it easier for you to perceive them. Although that's not a guarantee, some people just find they're more emotional and ungrounded around the full moon, and if you fall into that category, you might find it easier to develop your intuition and work with scrying during the dark moon instead, when the lunar influence is much more subdued. So those are things that you can try. But I think that it's good to have a regular monthly ritual for scrying, because it does take time to learn, and it's kind of boring in the beginning. If you were to just sit down every single day to try to learn scrying, I think you'd find it pretty tedious, and you'd quickly think it was pointless, because it doesn't come to you immediately. So having a regular monthly experiment running is a good idea. And the other thing you can do is make it a session where you're not only going to be using the scrying technique, you could also be working with another energy healing modality that is completely unrelated and has a completely different way of using it. Like, well, we mentioned the Avalonian system. You could work with the Avalonian system as part of your monthly ritual, which it involves activating the 9 energy centers from the Earth Star Center up to the Soul Star Center, which is above your head. Well, the chakras correspond with different levels of consciousness and different experiences, but also with different crystals, different planets, different times of year, different times of day, and you can build up quite a catalogue of correspondences as you progress your energy work. And by doing that, you're teaching yourself to connect with those symbols, to be able to look at the sun at midday and think, oh yes, the solar plexus chakra. Oh yes, the lion. And if I were to choose an oil, I might choose cinnamon oil. Like, you have a catalogue of correspondences after a while, and as that builds up, you're able to interpret symbols more easily. So working with a system like the Avalonian trilogy, when you're working with the Ocean of Intuition third eye activation, can also be helping you to develop your intuition, but in a different way, by learning the correspondences, by practicing the meditation technique, using symbols, which can help you to develop your skill in visualization. But do remember that none of these things come to you immediately. It takes practice, learning to visualize things and to use mantras without becoming distracted and things like that. It takes a little while, but regular practice is the key to that. So, and after a while, the rituals that you create just become your own, and you don't feel like you need to be reading the instructions as you go along. You're able to just go with the flow a bit more. That's everything that I wanted to cover in my general talk related to the Ocean of Intuition. But I've also got a couple of questions to cover, and the first of these is, I feel blocked when I try to read another person's energy. Will this course help? Referring to the Ocean of Intuition third eye activation. And the answer to that is yes, but with certain parameters, because this person didn't say in what context they were trying to read somebody's energy. I'm not sure if the person that they were trying to read had given their consent. And if you're trying to read somebody's energy without their consent, you are very likely to feel blocked, because that would be very inappropriate. So let's assume that they had the other person's consent, but were still not able to really connect with them. Well, it may not be you at all. That can be that the other person's energy is shut down. So, you can't judge your experience based on experiments on one person, because I've actually found that often it's when people drink alcohol, their energy can be quite shut down. But there are other things, some people, their energy might be shut down by medication, by illness, by emotional dysregulation. It could be anything, but it can also be you're trying to interpret their energy through a filter that's too limiting, and that you're squinting with your third eye, trying to see something that isn't actually there, rather than being receptive to what is there. So again, it is just a question of regular practice and learning to achieve the state of consciousness you need to achieve in order to gain those impressions and perceive the subtleties of another person's energetic field. There isn't a shortcut to it, I'm afraid. You need to be patient and consistent, and these things develop over time. And on another note, if you feel like you're in a tremendous hurry to be able to read another person's energy, like it's urgent, that's your ego talking. Your soul doesn't have the same kind of fixation. So you need to try to move away a bit from that ego consciousness and trust in the process. Be more open to the process and receptive to what the universe knows that you're ready for, rather than what you think you're ready for. Okay, and the second question is... this one I actually truncated the question because it was quite a long question, but I summarised it as which courses can help me to get stronger in my channeling ability. And one of the recommendations I made in response to this question was the Ocean of Intuition Third Eye Activation, but there are other options, and so it really depends on how you plan to work with the system. And the most comprehensive option is the Starseeds Psychic Activations course, which is a series of 10 attunements. So that's a more comprehensive energy, and by completing those attunements you're increasing your access to the information. I compare it with going from dial-up to broadband. So you're actually speeding up your connection. But in that case, developing the connection and speeding it up are things that you can do at the same time. So I feel like working with both systems is the optimal method, but working with either of them would strengthen your ability in channeling. So, there we go. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Okay, so on Wednesday, the next meditation track is going to be released. And this is a track for working with the Ocean of Intuition Third Eye Activation. So it can be used during the attunement and as well as during your sessions working with that energy. You can use it without the attunement, but it's not going to be as powerful as if you're using the attunement and then amplifying your experience by working with the meditation after you've been attuned to the energy. So that's going to be released on Wednesday, and it will already be out on Spotify by the time you're seeing this. So if you want to stream it now, it's on Spotify, Amazon, all the music apps. And you'll also find there are ambient versions of it. Now, I recommend the ambient version with the ocean waves for working with this energy, because the ocean is representative of the collective unconscious, and that's really going to help you to align with those symbols. Don't underestimate the power of doing something with intention. And if you are listening to the ambient version with the ocean waves, you can be thinking that you can hear the waves of the ocean, of the collective unconscious, washing up on the shore, leaving you gifts and symbols on the shore. And then you can become a beachcomber and start picking them up. But it's evocative, and so I'm going to recommend that one, the ocean version, the ocean waves mix. And I think that's all we've got for today. Oh, got a new camera. You may have noticed that. The first video in this style I recorded just on the webcam, but it was pretty diabolical. I hope you thought it was just deliberate and created that way for the aesthetics. Whereas this time it actually is, because I've got a decent camera, and the final result is going to be the filters that I choose to apply. And I'm going to apply the filters that I used to use for the old Whispering Witch videos. So it should look quite pretty and whimsical, and I hope you'll enjoy that. But that's everything that we've got to cover for today, and I hope you all have a good week. I hope you enjoy the meditation. If you take the special offer course, I hope you enjoy that too. And I'll be putting out live streams every day this week with looped versions of upcoming meditations, so keep an eye out for those. And if you're not already subscribed, do that. That would be great. And I'm hoping I'll see you again in a week. So in the meantime, I wish you peace, prosperity, and progress in all you do. With blessings.